I am currently a 31-year-old dividend growth investor that has been investing in dividend paying stocks and ETFs for around 7 years now. Now, earlier on, I was able to exit a business that I started in college, and by the name of the channel goes, am now a self-made 7-figure dividend investor because of this. But in this video, we're going to talk about something that I actually think about quite often, and this is the idea of selling off my entire 7-figure portfolio, which I currently have made up of over 50 different stocks and ETFs, and sell every single one of them and put every single dollar into the SCHD ETF, which just so happens to be my absolute favorite dividend growth ETF of all time. And stay tuned because I'll explain to you exactly why. Now, if this interests you at all, make sure to please stick around, especially towards the end of the video, because we're going to be doing a breakdown of the numbers and exactly how my future would look like if I was to do this. So first things first, I'm sure some of you might be curious to see which stocks and ETFs I currently hold as of right now, and make sure to look around on my channel because I've gone over my portfolios in previous videos. But this portfolio right here is made up of things like 1,000 shares of Apple stock, 921 shares of Realty Income, around 1,100 shares of Devo, and so on and so forth. And this is just one of my portfolios. Keep in mind, this portfolio as it sits right now is over $504,000 of current value. Now, most of the names in here are what I would consider dividend growth names. Some are a little bit more income focused, some a little bit more growth focused, but that's pretty much what makes up this portfolio. But now to talk a little bit more about the star of the show, the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF, or SCHD, has quickly become one of my favorite positions throughout my portfolios and one of my favorite investment vehicles of all time. Now, the reasoning behind this, the reason why I'm so interested in buying into the Schwab US Dividend Equity ETF as a long-term dividend growth investor is the fact that SCHD pretty much crosses off everything I'm looking for. The ETF has had some massive growth over time as far as ETF price. It pays a nice, decent starting dividend yield, which we are going to be going through all this in a minute here. And also, maybe most importantly, SCHD has a track record of pretty consistent dividend growth, which who doesn't like getting paid more and more over time? But for the few viewers that might not be really all that familiar with the SCHD ETF, let's dig a little bit deeper into the ETF, explain exactly how it works and what it currently has to offer. So the fund's objective is to track as closely as possible, before fees and expenses, the total return of the Dow Jones US 100 index. Now, this index is made up of a ton of high-quality dividend-paying stocks that all have a long-standing history of not only paying dividends, but also a lot of individual names within this index also have a history of pretty consistent dividend growth. Now, also important to note, especially for this video's example of me potentially selling off everything and buying only SCHD, $1 million worth, this ETF has a very low cheap expense ratio, which is definitely going to start to add up, especially if you are to buy hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars worth of this ETF. Next, looking a little bit deeper into SCHD's price performance over the entire lifespan of the fund, the ETF as far as price return hasn't done all that bad, although over the last year or two, the ETF has been pretty much trading sideways more or less, which in my opinion is offering a potential long-term buying opportunity, which I've been totally taking advantage of. But zooming out, SCHD is up 167% plus, and that's not even including dividends. Now, SCHD holding breakdown is pretty interesting because it is going to change on a consistent basis during the yearly reconstitution, but the holding breakdown as of right now at least is industrials at the top at around 17%, healthcare at around 16%, financials at over 15%, then we have consumer defensive at 12%, technology at 11%, then under 10% we have energy, consumer cyclical, communication, basic material, and utilities. Now, even though I've said and made it very clear that this ETF is my favorite long-term buy and hold forever dividend growth ETF, I am not necessarily a huge fan of every single one of the top 10 holdings, which is completely okay because when it comes to SCHD, there's going to be around 100 different holdings within this ETF. So even if you aren't a fan of one or two, it's not necessarily make it or break it. Now, one of my favorite things about being a dividend growth investor is, of course, earning money from dividends monthly or, of course, quarterly. Now, with SCHD, we're currently seeing a 3.76% trailing 12-month dividend yield, which is not all that bad at all, especially considering some of the growth potential this ETF has. But maybe even more important, and if you've watched my videos before, you know my favorite input metric by far is dividend growth rate, which is basically how much a stock or ETF pays in dividends year over year. And in the case for SCHD, they have been paying dividends more and more consistently pretty much since the inception of the ETF. And just a side note here, I'm super excited to see what the ETF's next dividend is going to be because SCHD is paying another dividend just a few weeks away. And the reason I bring up the fact that I'm currently a relatively younger investor that owns around 400 or 450 shares of SCHD right now, and the reason being on why dividend growth is so important to me is because if you have enough time on your side, and if you hold on to an ETF or a stock for that matter, that does have the potential to keep paying more and more dividends as time goes on, which as we see right here, the SCHD ETF has definitely done so. Theoretically speaking, in the next 10 years, if I'm paid double or triple the amount in dividends just for holding onto the asset, that is going to make me a very happy and hopefully a very rich investor. So now that we went over some of what the SCHD ETF has to offer, how the ETF works, and some of the reasons this ETF is my all-time favorites. Heading over to the Dividend Calculator, typing in $1 million. Let's say I was to sell off every single dividend stock and ETF that I currently own and invest it all into the SCHD ETF, and only on top of that add an extra $1,000 on a yearly basis. Now, like I said earlier, this is something that I've actually thought about on my own time and actually considered, and honestly been pretty interested in seeing what the numbers are going to look like. But if we were to type in a $1 million starting principal, $1,000 of annual contributions from there, 3.74% initial starting dividend yield, an 8% annual dividend amount increase, which of course that could be higher or lower, a 3% expected annual share price appreciation. And since I'm 31 years old, let's go with 30 years. Let's see what we would end up with when I'm 61 years old. So the numbers are in year number one, with $1 million invested into SCHD, I'd be earning around $37,927 per year in dividends. Now that might seem like quite a bit of money paid out in dividends, but to be completely honest and transparent, I earn a lot more than that currently because of course I do have some stocks and some ETFs that are much higher yield than 3.74%. But after the annual contribution of $1,000, and of course after these dividends are reinvested year number two, we'd be at $1,063,042 per year in dividends just by year number two. By year number three, $1.132 million and $47,000 in dividends per year. By year number five, almost $1.3 million and almost $60K per year in dividends. By year number 10, so this will bring me up to 41 years old, let's just say, $1.8 million in principal, not bad at all, and over $107,000 per year in dividends. By year number 15, in theory, this portfolio could be up to $2.77 million. So at this point, I would be, 46 years old and $206,000 per year in dividends. I could definitely live with that. By year number 20, $4.4 million and $426,000 per year in dividends. Next, by year number 25, I'd be 56 years old at this point and almost $7.9 million in principal and just shy of $960,000 per year in dividends. And lastly, by year number 30, in theory, just going off of all the numbers we inputted, keep in mind this is all just an estimate and just for fun, we'd be looking at around $15.5 million in principal and $2.419 million per year in dividends. Now, of course, we don't know what the future is going to look like as far as inflation and what a dollar is going to be worth in the future, but $2.419 million in dividends sounds pretty good to me. So there we have it, $1 million invested into SCHD as a current 31-year-old dividend growth investor would look exactly like this long term. Now, like I said before, I don't plan on selling my entire portfolio and buying only SCHD, but as of right now, I have for a while and am planning to keep buying more and more SCHD as time goes on. But now I want to hear from you guys down below. When it comes to dividend growth, what is your number one favorite dividend growth ETF across the entire market? Drop it in the comments down below. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to please drop a like on it and subscribe for more future content like this. Thanks as always for stopping by, and if you are interested in investing, make sure to check out these recent videos I posted right here.